My father used to say that it's never too late to do anything you wanted to do. And he said, you never know what you can accomplish until you try. Michael Jordan. This is Dadography, a podcast with stories and insights on fatherhood from dads around the globe, dedicated to providing you with the tools and tips to become a better dad. I'm your host, Coray Ward. Welcome to the final episode of Dadography. Really excited to have you here. We're wrapping up season 1. I've got a special episode for you today as we bring things to a close. And today's, not just guest, but today's participant, active and involved with Dadography, is our sound engineer, our producer, Vic Brown. Vic, welcome on this side of the microphone, my man.
Thanks a lot, Coray. I appreciate it. Hey, executive decision number 1 that I'm making right now. We're going to have to introduce clapping sounds whenever you introduce someone. Keep that in mind for the new season. We're going to have some clapping or something, man. We can't have these silent introductions anymore.
Definitely. I agree with you, man. I agree with you. Well, man, just to give our listeners a feel for what's going on, let me talk to the guys and let them know that Victor has been beyond essential in terms of good sound quality, engineering, and producing these shows. We had a conversation prior to the launch of Dadography, and he immediately said, listen, I want to be a part of that. Let's make it happen. And here we are now at the end of season 1. And for what it's worth, Vic, I'm incredibly grateful for all of your contributions. I have actually given thought to what if I had to do this all by myself. That would be quite the challenge. As the saying goes, the lone wolf usually starves. So I'm glad to be in the same pack with you, man, for sure.
Man, it was an easy decision for me, man. As soon as I heard what you were trying to do, man, I'm like, I'm in, man. This is exactly what I'm about. I like this. I like the idea, the concept, the product, everything, whatever you want to label it. It's dope. So definitely I had to figure out a way to help. How can I help? What can I do? So that was an easy decision for me, man.
Yeah, probably what really stands out to me, Vic, and we'll get into your story and your fatherhood experience in an upcoming episode in season 2. But just like you said, how immediately you were like, no, I'm in. Let's do it. Yeah, like I said, incredibly grateful for that. So yeah, man, we are at the end of season 1. This is the 12th episode. And we kind of decided early on we're going to do 12 episodes per season, then take a step back and see what we can do to better serve some of the dads out there and make this really have some serious value for them on their journey in fatherhood. What do you think, man? What do you think about season 1, Vic?
Season 1 was all about growth, man. We started basically with a lot of information, but very little action as far as actually doing it. So it was almost like honestly, it felt like, sometimes when you just throw the kid in the pool, you know,
Right.
seriously, man, it felt like that. The difference is like when you throw the kid in the pool, you're there. So if anything happens, you can just jump in the pool with the kid, but it really felt like that, man. Like, you know what, man, let's just jump in the pool and let's do it and let's see what it's about. And if I have to give season 1 a label, I will say growth. Going into season 2 now, I will say growth demands change. So now it's like, okay, we did this in season 1. What were the good things? What were the things that we could do better? What are the things that we can keep doing? And I mean, we've come a long way in season 1. You've come a long way as an interviewer, man. I tip my hat to you, Coray. I can see, I can hear, I can sense the growth in the interviews, the questions, the follow-up questions. A lot of growth there, my brother. Good growth for the better, for the movement, for better dads.
Indeed. You said something pretty strong there. You said for the movement. And I think it's important that for you guys that listen to us regularly, one, we certainly do appreciate you, but 2, recognize that this is a movement. We kind of put out there early on that we are under the persuasion that fatherhood is a pivotal portion or part of society as a whole. And so if we can fill our portion or do our part in being fathers, then we can ultimately affect society, which obviously entails the world at large. So that's pretty significant in the big scheme of things, really significant. So, obviously you've heard all the shows probably more than anybody, Vic, primarily because you edit the shows. You make sure that you eliminate some of the uhs, which I'm notorious for, right? And in all honesty, I think I sound a little bit better because of you. But what are some standouts? What are some standouts in terms of lessons that you've learned from this first season, man?
That's a great question, man. I will have to say, to be honest, my number one. Well, I wouldn't say number one. I'm going to call it my first, right? From the episode with Henny, if I'm not mistaken, that's episode number 2, when he said that his best friend basically told him, hey, man, do stuff with your kids. You know, that's so basic, but that is so important, man. Do stuff with your kids. I listened to it and I'm like, man, that's like, why isn't everyone doing that? you know, but
Exactly.
you know what I'm saying. But I think that was the first take that I said, you know what, let me grab this, put it in my bag. It is something that I do, but at the same time, just hearing it so basic. Hey, do he wasn't saying, hey, go camping or go swimming, go here, go there, travel the world with your kids. No, he just said, hey, do stuff with your kid.
Yeah. Practically profound, as a saying would be. That was one of the things that I really appreciated from season 1 as well. Another real standout for me, there were a couple of interviews where the dads just kind of put everything on the line, if I can say that. Like, they were totally transparent. One standout would be Ben, talking about being a news broadcaster and then later on having an alcohol and substance abuse problem. And then ultimately now he's running his company there in the US with his kids and having recouped from that. And then the other one would be Errol from
Curacao. Arrow is from Curacao.
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 Curacao,
Yeah,
yes.
Curacao. Yeah. That episode was really touching because as I mentioned in that particular episode, you're in a spot where, partying is the lifestyle. And so, just his transparency and sharing how he sits down and talks with his boys to establish with them some boundaries, some governors, as it were, to help them make determinations and better decisions in life. Yeah.
I have to agree with the Ben episode. Man, listening to that story, I chatted you a few times while I was editing that interview. Man, this story is just incredible. I don't know if the listeners really got a chance to soak it all in. His story, it's incredible, man. It's the greatest comeback story ever. It starts off really good, goes into a really unfortunate situation, and then ends up in a really great situation. That was a great story, man. I love that episode, man.
Yeah, I can't forget episode 6 where Richard talked about the value of happiness and how, as fathers, our primary goal is to prepare our children for happiness. That kind of caught me off guard. Richard and I were really good friends, and so the fact that he would drop that knowledge bomb, for lack of a better term, right in the midst of the show was a good thing for me, and I'm definitely still, trying to grab the concept to the depths that I think it goes.
What he did there was he basically took it down to the core. It was
Yeah,
basically like, let's strip all of this other stuff. Not saying that education is not important, values are not important, this is not important, but at the core of it all, we're striving for happiness, and
right.
you know what I'm saying? He just stripped it down to the core, man. And I'm like, when I heard it, I was like, okay. And you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, we're all striving for, some sort of happiness.
So what about Mervin over in India, man? There was this one comment that Mervin made, and he said in India, the parents are like gods. That floored me, man. I did not see that coming, and it it floored me, but it speaks to the reverence that children are brought up with for their fathers, and how the fathers even see their children in terms of recognizing that they're extremely valued, honored, respected. And so ultimately, you know, taking on that role is a huge, not just responsibility, but it's a huge honor, you know?
Man, I don't remember the phrase that he used, man, because it's an Indian phrase. It's father is God, and there was another one, mother is God. And if you think about it, other cultures have similar ways of looking at their parents. Like, for example, in Christianity, there's a verse that says, honor your mother, honor your father, so that your days are longer. you know
Right.
so I'm sure there are other maybe religions or other movements that they basically preach about honoring your parents or do good by your parents, and things like that. But your parent as being God, when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's amazing. It's actually a great revolving door statement. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so I'm going to raise you to understand that I am to be honored, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to end up taking care of me.
Exactly.
You understand what I'm saying? So I'm like, man, that's an awesome revolving door. So, I'm going to teach you to honor me, so that when it comes time for you to basically take care of me, you have no issues taking care of me. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you were brought up and you were taught to honor your parents, So I saw that as a great revolving door, so it keeps that extended family scenario going.
Speaking of extended families, we can't forget episode "It Takes a Village to Raise a Child" with David Dabo from West Africa and Burkina Faso. The cultural insight that he shared about how his son, if he were home, would not be his son, it would be his dad's son, and he would have to watch and observe, really gave some perspective, a totally new perspective for me on viewing fatherhood, and how I think what I walked away with is that fatherhood is not just something, in the Western culture, we will have a child and you start raising that child. But just the idea of how that practice of "it takes a village to raise a child" is put into effect in Burkina Faso made me think, wait a minute, fatherhood is something to be learned, and it's a continual learning process. It's not just like, oh, okay, you got a son or you have a daughter and so now you do it. I mean, yeah, you have to do it, but to reach the level of fatherhood that I would assume all dads want to attain in raising their children, it's a learned process.
When he said that, I had to think about it, and I had to basically put myself, or try to put myself in the culture, like, because if you're not in the culture and you're looking at it with Western culture eyes, you're like, man, I'm not
Mhm.
doing that. you know
Right, right.
that's my son. Give me my son, I'm raising my son. So if you put yourself in the culture, I think it's perfect. I really do think it's perfect. I think if it were applicable to our culture, man, think of the help. you know think
Yeah.
of it as a resource. Think of it of, like, man, this child not only has mom and dad, but has mom, dad, grandma, grandfather, maybe uncles, all around, and all of the time. Not like, okay, we're gonna go visit grandma or we're gonna go visit grandpa. Not No, they are around all of the time. So another thing about that, it takes a village, right? I was analyzing that, because it was something that was said in many of the episodes, right? The fact that it takes a village, or the fact that, hey, we need help.
The most recent one was Keith, and he mentioned, the community, and his breakdown was so precise. He mentioned how, if you're in a community where the community is supportive of, say, selling drugs, then you're almost expected to sell drugs. But if you're in a community that, is positive and about education or about, entrepreneurship and careers and building, then you almost by nature, I think might be the right word, you gravitate towards that. And so he's another one that just, really emphasized the idea of this village surrounding you raising your child.
Keith episode was another outstanding episode. He reminded me of when I was living in Brownsville, because at the end of that he mentioned, like, well, you know what, if your community, it's about crime, then guess what, more than likely the kids who grew up in that community are going to be about crime. And
Right.
unfortunately, the community that I grew up in, it was about crime. A lot of people were about crime. We had some really good people in the community, don't get me wrong. We had some really good people. We had some people that, we looked up to. We had some people in the community, those moms or those dads that you can't curse in front of them. You know,
Right. Right.
we had those people in the community, but then we also had other people in the community that were about that fast life, or were about, not necessarily doing what's right. You used a very interesting word there. You said supportive, right? So
Hmm.
I think community on its own is not enough. The community has to be supportive. I think the village on its own is not enough. The village has to be supportive. I live in a good community right now,
Right.
like if my son had to be outside or walk around or run around, I'm not worried about anything. But is that community supportive? Like, my kid is safe, he's outside or whatever, but is that community supportive in me raising my child? Is that village supportive in me raising my child? So I think having a good community or having a good village is a good first step, right? But I think
Yeah.
the second step is also that village or that community being supportive.
So perhaps we've stumbled on something that's significant as our listeners contemplate their fatherhood and their journey in fatherhood, and implementing different principles that govern or direct their raising of their children. And it sounds like one of the things they should be doing is being very conscious of the community in which they surround their children by, or the lack thereof, for that matter.
You said that in an episode. If you don't think environment is important, ask a fish.
Yeah, right.
I remember that. Environment is very important, and you have to be very intentional about the environment that you decide to raise your kids in, or the environment that you decide to be a father in. So, yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we certainly can't forget about our inaugural episode, Progress Over Perfection, my man Les. One of the things that I liked about that particular episode was that he broke the mold by presenting that fatherhood, or being a father, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. He has an older son that's going through some challenges, and he looked at himself and said, "Oh, I could have did this different, this different." Of course, having put forth his best foot to raising him, his son, was able to look at him in the eyes and say, "Look, Dad, it's not your fault. This is my fault. You were a great dad." But even with that, now with his younger son, he's being a lot more proactive. If I remember correctly, one of the things that was a standout, and it was probably, ironically enough, it was reminiscent of the very last episode about conversation. But what one of the things that he's doing now with his younger son that he felt he didn't really do so much with the older, is that they spend time having these conversations. And again, the last episode, one of the things that Keith really emphasized was having conversations with his children. And it's important to note that conversation just doesn't mean lecturing, but listening so that you understand the individual that your child is and you can respond accordingly, you know?
Absolutely, man. Les is my dude, man. Les has a military background, and he talked about sometime giving instructions, and you guys had a little back and forth about making the instruction make sense.
Right,
So
right.
it's not just a matter of telling your kid, hey, do this, do that, but also explaining to your child why would you like them to do this, or why you don't want them to do that, and so on and so on. But he learned in the military that at times you're going to get orders to save your life. And you don't have time to sit there and explain why I'm giving this order. So
Yeah.
yes, it's a good idea to explain, and it's a positive thing to explain to your child, hey, this is why I want you to do this, or this is why I don't want you to do that. But he said that at times, you should be able to give orders, and that those orders should be followed because they might be life-saving orders.
You know, when my kids, at least the two that are still with me now, when they were younger, we actually would have practice when we go outside and we may be walking along the sidewalk and I would say, stop. And they would have to condition themselves to not look around, not ask me why, not try to just obey the instruction. And they stop on a dime. I remember explaining to them, listen, I will never pull that screen stop on you as a joke, as a, something just to, exploit my being a father and you have to do what I say. But if I go, stop, you just don't move. And potentially crossing the street, whatever the case may be, that could save your life. And so, yeah, all that to say, I agree with that 120%, man. It's very, very important for them to understand that as an authoritative figure in their life, they also need to be ready at the drop of a hat to just follow the instruction. And, we can follow up later with a conversation on it, So,
Exactly. That's exactly what he said. That later, after the fact, we could follow up with a conversation, and I could let you know why I wanted you to do that.
So listen, here's a thought, right? So Stan is from, is
Sweden,
it not
Sweden.
Sweden? I keep wanting to say Switzerland, but Stan, that episode really touched me, and perhaps to me, to be totally honest, perhaps more than any other, because I could hear in Stan's interview a lot of pain. One of the insights was the fact that he was able to give us a view from hindsight. Stan is 70 plus years old. His wife had just died, 7 years ago. And so he moved to a whole different continent to kind of, deal with that. But, again, one of the things he said is he would have spent more time with his children. But the wisdom that I walked away with Stan from was something that, again, Keith, reminiscent of that interview, he mentioned how having the right partner is key. And I know that not a lot of thought, a lot of times go into, who's going to have my child or who am I going to co-parent with or parent with. But that's definitely a major factor.
Stan's episode, man. I also felt the pain. I can hear it in his voice, man. He misses his wife. I agree fully with that, and actually, I can even relate it to the single dad episode with Linnell. One of the issues that Linnell mentioned about how he ended up being a single dad was basically once the children came into play, the relationship changed.
Yeah.
So then when I heard Keith mention that, it kind of like the two made sense. You almost have to vet your
Hmm.
partner, with regards
Yeah.
to that. Yeah, almost like you got to vet them, because when you think about it, for the most part, you're like, hey, do you want to have kids? Yeah. Do you want to have kids? Yeah. Okay, we both want to have kids. Okay, we're good. You know, but there's a lot more to it than that. Like, okay, I want to have kids. You want to have kids, but what does that picture really look like?
Yeah. In relation to that, as we would vet or just be very conscious of who we're having children with. One of the things that really stood out, last thought on Stan's episode, is that his wife would tell him, or him and the children, this is your castle. And so ultimately, what transpired is, they were always ready to come home. And if I'm not mistaken, he said, whatever happens, or she said, whatever happens, come home. And that really resonated with me because my upbringing, I think, I'm not sure it was as welcoming. And that's not to downplay the love that I got at home, because I did get love. And that safe place, I think, is really significant in the upbringing of a child. I think it has psychological effect, of being a part of a community. I think it helps to set the moral compass. It's just come home. That was really significant for me in that episode, for sure.
Speaking of moral compass.
Yeah,
Man,
compass.
my Spanish is getting the best of me, man.
Yeah, tomato, tomato. No worries.
David mentioned that actually that's his style of raising his kid. Like he's not really very specific or very detailed as far as situations. His hope is that the general sense of values, morals, will basically guide him through life. That will be his moral compass, because you're not going to have every possible scenario. You're not going to run into every possible situation where you can teach a child, hey, when this happens, go left, or when this happens, go right, or when you see this, don't do this, or look the other way. So when he used that term, it was like, look, man, eventually they'll have enough information that whenever they see something that they're not used to seeing or they don't really understand, that will help guide them.
I think by far and large, even as the interviewer, I walked away from season one, a better dad. I know for sure I've taken more initiative in spending time with the kids. And a lot of the lessons, I've tried to implement into the teaching and upbringing of my children. So I'm grateful, man. And that, I'm not even sure if that's politically correct to say that I'm grateful, since I'm, the host and interviewing people. But these guys really contributed a lot, Vic. And one of the things, and I'm not even sure which dad it was, but actually there were a few of them when they had the invitation to come on to the show. They're like, oh, well, I'm not a professional. I'm not, And, my response to them was, listen, your kids, 13, 14, 18, whatever the case may be. I got news for you. You've been doing it that many years. You are. If you were in, some work industry and you had been doing it for 15 years, newsflash, you got some very important information. So I definitely walked away a few feet taller as a result of all of these guys, man, for sure.
Absolutely. So did I. I actually got a lot of things in my bag. And also, I was able to do like a small self evaluation, you know, because it's not only about what I'm missing or what I'm not doing, but I also like to know if what I'm doing is right. So there were
Yeah.
some things that I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm doing this. Okay, yeah, I'm doing this also. I do stuff with my son. I foster this. I do that. So it's not just about learning what to do, what others are doing, but also about a little self evaluation. So if you are doing some of these things, feel good about yourself and like, hey, I'm not such a bad dad after all.
I agree. I agree. Hands down, season one met my expectations and exceeded them. Hey, Vic, so let me ask you this, my man. We're headed into season two. By the way, we are going to be taking a 3-week revamp to determine, what's the direction we'd like the show to go in. So we will be back with you guys on September the 7th, sharing with you season number 2. And if you have enjoyed the first season, we strongly encourage you to include uh, us on your Facebook page, your Instagram page. Share the episodes that you appreciated, that you enjoyed. We need your help because, as mentioned earlier, it is a movement, and we want to grow this movement. Our objective from the very first episode, episode 0, is clear. We want to build up fathers. We want to put tools in your tool bags. The layout or the format of the interviews are very intentional. None of the guys are quote unquote experts. They're all fathers with experience. And with that experience, it's not something we're looking to debate. I'm not looking to say, hey, well, I don't agree with that or I agree with it. No, what we want is your experience. And then we, as well as yourself, will glean the insight that we can include into our own tool bags in our fatherhood. So as we approach season 2, I also want to encourage all of you guys to make people aware that this show is out there for them. But Vic, here's the question. What are you hoping for, looking for, expecting in season number 2?
I'm expecting a high profile guest. We're gonna get one, man. We're gonna get a high profile guest. I'm expecting someone, A-list celebrity, B-list celebrities. I don't know, but I'm really shooting for a high profile guest, someone that everyone is gonna say, you know what? Hey, let me see, let me hear what The Rock is saying. Let me hear what D Nice is saying. I don't know, so definitely I'm expecting for a high profile guest. That's one of the main things. And I'm also expecting for the movement and the community to grow.
Guys, one of the things we're going to be doing as we roll into the next season is we are going to be establishing a Facebook group where you'll be able to address comments, questions, concerns from episodes that you hear. It'll also be somewhat of a support group for the dads that are out there. And shout out to Linnell, who is a single dad and made us aware that there is a different narrative. A lot of times single dads get a bad rap. And so we just want to build a community where, maybe once we establish this group, you guys will be able to log in and say, hey, I've got a 16-year-old and, I found, marijuana in his jacket. What would you do? So we want to build a community. The goal is to really build you guys up. And so one of the things that I'm looking for, Vic, to be totally transparent with you, is that I'm looking for more audience engagement and participation. And I'll use this moment just to remind guys, on our website, dadography.net, down at the bottom of that page, there's a microphone. And you just click on it and you start recording, and you can just speak into an episode that you enjoyed, something that inspired you, and you're going to start taking action, or actions that you have taken, results that you've seen, any number of things. And we will be on upcoming episodes be asking questions, because we do want the insight of fathers from around the globe. Another thing, guys, you may have noticed that the majority of our shows have been all over the place, from Sweden to Africa to the Caribbean to the US to Latin America. And that's intentional because we're fully aware that we all have blind spots, and culture can usually help you see some of those blind spots, that things you just hadn't thought about. So definitely audience anticipation or participation, is something that I'm looking forward to in the Facebook group. And I like what you said, man, a high profile guest. But shout out to all our dads that gave us an interview this season, because they may not be high profile, but they are 100% high on the priority list of individuals that we want to speak to, and we certainly do appreciate it.
I'd like to shout out Mark Owens for that being a fan statement.
That's revolutionary,
Yeah,
man.
it is. Shout out to Mark
Definitely.
Owens for that being a fan.
Yes.
That was great.
Yes.
Shout out to Errol Kova. Walk your talk. You hear it all the time. Practice what you preach. But when he broke it down, It was like, man, walk your talk. Don't talk left and walk right. Don't talk right and act left. If you tell your child this, make sure that's what you're practicing. Shout out to Earl for that also. All of the other dads, Richard, Lester, Ben, Keith, David Cabo, Mervin.
These guys are great. And guys, if you're listening, which I know most of you are, in fact, avid fans of the show, listen, man. And I know I told you once we were closing the show, but you were really, really, really appreciated for one, helping us be better dads, but two, helping other dads be better dads. And so continue to make massive, positive inputs into your children's life. And every opportunity you have, encourage other dads to do the same, man. So we're definitely grateful for that.
Become part of the supportive community. Become part of that supportive village.
So listen, I heard that there are some women out there listening to the show. And so for you women out there that are listening to the show, whether you're a single mom or you're just listening to the show to kind of get a sense of how you can be more supportive of your husband or your significant other, whatever the reason that you listen to the show, we want to acknowledge you, let you know that we appreciate your support. And the same as we ask for the guys, hey, listen, share it. That's the thing. Teamwork makes the dream work, and as I said earlier, the lone wolf usually starves.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely share it. I like that the fact that a lot of people like it, but at the end of the day, share it. Send it to someone, email it to someone, send it to someone in a chat, WhatsApp, whatever, but definitely share it. Let's make this movement grow.
Without question, without question. Also, and maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but we are also on Instagram. All of our fathers are posted on Instagram with their children. And so be sure to follow us along there because we're going to be, as we move into season 2, we're going to be obviously giving some inspirational thoughts on fatherhood. And we just want to be a source of encouragement for you on this journey because we're totally aware that it's not always easy. It's just not, but it's totally worth it. Where are we at on Instagram, Vic?
On Instagram, we are at Dadography Podcast. So be sure to follow us on Instagram. We're also on YouTube. So search for us on YouTube, Dadography Podcast, and, engage with us.
Yeah, I think the YouTube idea, just addressing that, I think it was a brilliant idea. Another one of your brainchild. We're not a video show. And so that you understand, the reason that we're not a video show is because we're usually dealing with time zones and all type of factors. And the streaming is a little bit more challenging, et cetera, et cetera. All that to say, we don't have dads come into a studio where we're interviewing them. So we're interviewing them from their location. And doing the video would be a little bit more challenging. Who knows? Maybe season 3, 4, or 5.
Man, you read my mind, man. Get out of my head. Get out of my head. Definitely.
Yeah, maybe we'll incorporate that.
Season
But
3.
for now, it's audio, and having it on YouTube is a way to share it with people who perhaps don't have a podcast app that they listen to. So yeah, man, I'm content. I'm content with season 1. Well, guys, I want to thank you for being a part of the movement, fellas. And I need you to understand that it's not going to stop. We are going to get more intentional about growing the show, about bringing you quality content and helping you along your journey to be a better dad. I think it's something that is notable, something that is worth striving for. And I want to stand beside you. Vic wants to stand beside you in your journey of fatherhood. And so here we are. So let's make it happen. And we humbly request that you help us make it happen. Again, teamwork makes the dream work. All right, fellas, we'll see you back on September the 7th with season 2 of the Dadography podcast. We anticipate bringing to you more insights on fatherhood from dads around the globe. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dadography podcast. Thanks very much for listening. I would, however, like to invite you to be a part of the show. Visit our website at dadography.net. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, click on the microphone, tell us your name, where you're from, and what fatherhood means to you. Remember, it takes more than DNA to be a dad.